Welcome to Remix EQ Live, where we are amplifying equity with a remix of information, interviews, and inspiration. I'm your host, Dr. Erica Tate, and today I am broadcasting live from Savannah, Georgia, where I live. For those joining us today, please drop a greeting of choice. Hello, hi. Hiya. Hey, girl, hey, in the comments. Let us know where you are joining from and the equity work you do or aspire to do. And remember, Remix EQ Live is an experience that's meant to be shared. So I encourage you to hit your share and invite buttons and bring along your people, your network, your family, your friends to join our Remix EQ community today. And this season, we are broadcasting on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter. We can now connect more broadly, growing our reach and building our learning community. And while those comments are flowing in and those invitations are flowing out, I want to remind you that Remix EQ Live offers the opportunity for us to connect and build community with each other around the equity-driven work being performed throughout the world. And we do this by centering the work. That is, our guests and viewers share examples of what they do in their role or position as a way to illustrate the innovative, effective, and meaningful ways they advance equity in the spaces in which they live, work, and play. So, throughout the show and in the comments, I invite you to also share what you do to make the world a more just place. It is season 5 of Remix EQ Live, and this is the last interview show of the season. In this episode, I am in a critical conversation with Dr. Lesley-Ann Noel, a global design educator and practitioner, and author of the book Design Social Change, Take Action, Work Toward Equity, and Challenge the Status Quo. She is also a social justice warrior and a futurist. Today's episode centers design, equity, justice, and change as we listen and learn from Dr. Lesley-Ann Noel about how to dream with communities who have been historically marginalized and design with them equitable futures. So let us initiate this critical conversation for change. Welcome, Dr. Lesley-Ann Noel.
Thank you, Dr. Erica Tate.
So, Lesley-Ann, I invite you to introduce yourself. Please share 1 to 2 career or personal twists and turns that have led you to your current role.
so there have been so many twists and turns, right? I'm actually gonna go way back, like to the early '90s. The first twist was actually I did undergrad in Brazil, so I studied in Brazil, and even getting to Brazil was the first twist. When I was in what we call upper sixth in Trinidad, which is like 12th grade, I decided I wanted to study anywhere in the world except where my parents wanted to send me. And they said, well, you need to figure out how you're going to get there. And I randomly met a Brazilian woman in the mall, and she works at the Brazilian embassy. And she said, hey, why don't you apply for our scholarship? So that's like the first random twist that got me to Brazil. And that's how I studied industrial design. I studied on scholarship in Brazil. And there have been other twists. My life is a combination of random happenings. So I went to work in Uganda for 6 months. It was just me one day, like, let me go on this website and see if this opportunity is available. That's almost how I ended up at Stanford as well. I went to Stanford's website, the D School's website, a couple days before an opportunity closed, and I just put in my application and I got there. And even moving from when I started off university, I was a Portuguese language professor, and then moving to the art school was also a random thing where I was just kind of in the right place at the right time. And someone said, hey, shouldn't you be in the design school? And I said, yes, maybe I should be. I said, well, why don't you come across? So, and of course I'm oversimplifying it, but really, my life has been about a lot of twists and turns, and I've been open to and responsive to these twists. And you know, I'm in my 50s now. I think that life really actually has been very exciting because I've just been able to pivot as needed to take advantage of some of these opportunities.
Well, I love it. Thank you for sharing. I love the random happenings that have occurred. And your global pathway and being able to travel and learn across the world is really exciting. I'm excited to hear and learn more. And I know from reading your book that has really influenced your design practice. I'm also, I think it's really great that at the end you noted that you were receptive and open to those changes, and that really allowed, as you said, to have an exciting life, you know, a life filled with joy. So thank you so much for sharing. It's always great to hear about twists, turns, random happenings, because it really normalizes how we move through our personal and career lives. So definitely connect with Dr. Lesley-Ann Noel in the comments during this episode. And for those who are just joining us, this is Remix EQ Live, and we're amplifying equity through a remix of information, interviews, and inspiration. And now that you've had the chance to meet or reconnect with Dr. Lesley-Ann Noel, I know you're inviting others to tune in. And of course, I invite you to interact with us. So post comments to say hello, hi, ask questions that come up, share examples or learnings that are related to what we're talking about as we dive into this interview. You are part of the Remix EQ Live experience. So now we center the work. This is an opportunity for us to learn from Lesley-Ann about the critical design perspectives and practices that lead to equitable futures. And as we say on the show, make the world a more just place. So, speaking of twists and turns, you are currently transitioning from your role as assistant professor of design studies at North Carolina State University to the dean of the Faculty of Design at the Ontario College of Art and Design University in Toronto. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's very exciting. I love when trajectories happen between the time I've contacted a guest and when they appear on the show. It's really wonderful to see your advancement. As a design educator and practitioner, how do you enable designers to create social change that leads to equitable futures?
So I've had equity running as a theme in my work, my teaching, and my research for a little while. For maybe I've always been interested in different forms of equity, but within the last 5 years, I've made it a very big focus in the work that I do. And so, how am I trying to get designers to create social change? One is I'm trying to encourage designers that they should know that there are many roles that we can play in making social change. And actually, as designers, we can fill many of those roles. So the role of storyteller, listener, builder, you know, and I'm actually citing somebody else's work as I think of some of these roles. I'm thinking of Deepa Ayer's map of the roles that people can play in change making. But designers, because we imagine things that don't exist, that gives us a superpower that not everybody has. So, you know, designers can be visionaries and can help people imagine, help people move from just wanting to change something, or not even yet recognizing the way change is needed, but, you know, maybe help people move from being a little bit upset about something towards getting them to dream about the thing that they want. And then finally, you know, or not even finally yet, getting them to work on the prototypes of what that thing is. And then finally, the storytelling afterwards, you know. So, how do I get designers to create social change? I try to get them to understand the many different roles that they can play and get them into action, right? Because as designers, that's what we're good at. We're good at action. So maybe we can just focus that action on better worlds. And that's what I've done as a research theme. I'm just trying to focus on how can we make life better for everyone.
Yeah, that's great. I love breaking down the different roles that designers can play in this process and their connection to action. And you know, if you're going to take action, why not take action that makes the world better?
Definitely.
I'm a supporter of that.
Yeah. You know, and we can see, you know, through our lenses, through our point of views, we can also see much more acutely where change is needed. And again, as designers, we can take action on that based on this new thing that we're seeing, based on who we are.
Yeah, I love it. Different lens, a different perspective to
Yeah.
problems that have been existing for a long time. So this is great. I'm so excited. So we're going to move into the next part because we're going to learn a little bit more about how she does that and the tools that she equips designers with. So for those of you who tune in to Remix EQ Live on a regular basis, you know that in our learning community, we celebrate with each other, especially the works of our guests. This is what they produce for others, books, talks, online content, card decks, and so on. So let us celebrate. So Lesley-Ann, you have recently written and published the book, Design Social Change, Take Action, Work Toward Equity, and Challenge the Status Quo. Why did you write this book and who should read it?
All right, so I'm gonna hold up my book as well. Why did I write? Yes, why did I write this book? So my PhD research was about empowering education, and I was trying to create empowering design curriculum. And in that work, I was very inspired by the work of Paulo Freire and Ira Shore and Michael Apple and all of these people who are into critical pedagogy, which asks the students to really take a critical view of the world and then know that they can change the world, right? So in critical pedagogy, you are using the student's experience in what you're teaching. And so my PhD research was about that, creating like really local design curricula, getting people to think about the change that was needed in the world and then getting them to act on it. So getting them to be very critical of the world, imagine what they wanted next, and then act on it. And so writing this book was an opportunity for me to start to make my PhD research, which sometimes can seem a little bit remote, right? You know how PhDs are, right? So I wanted to take that information and make it like really, really accessible to ordinary people. I also had the time I spent at Tulane and in New Orleans actually really deepened my social design practice, because I was working in a center for social innovation that did design in different ways. And then they gave me the space to also ask my questions in different ways. And then the last thing that I also added to the book is I was thinking about this class that I teach at NC State that I really love, contemporary issues in art and design, where I am encouraging students to, again, be critical of the world. It's a very Freirean approach, and we look at a whole range of issues. And then I'm trying to get students to be a little bit activist, or not a little bit, very activist, and then think about the thing where they see changes needed and do something about it. So this book combines all of these three things: the PhD research, the time in New Orleans, and then this experience here in North Carolina and Raleigh. And they're about getting people to see change and act on it in whatever way they want as designers. So who should read this book? That was your second question. And it's a few different audiences. As people read it, they'll hear two different voices. So the first voice is that I'm writing to people who feel that they don't have power. And that could be everybody. That could be us. It could be, because sometimes we do feel powerless, as maybe women of color, as in my case, maybe as an older woman, as we feel like we can't change the world. And so the book is written to that group so that they realize actually you have a lot more power and agency than you think, right? Paulo Freire actually said in one of his books that the world doesn't just happen to us, we happen to the world as well. And so everybody has agency because we can impact this world that we are in. And then the other voice is for people who have power, right? So that they learn to read better. I don't want to say the others, but you know what I mean? And they also can think about, okay, where do they need to give up some of their space? Where do they need to share opportunities? Where do they need to shift power? So throughout the book, I'm kind of shifting between these two voices and audiences.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's really great to hear like the origins of a book, where you both like your research that you did, but also the locations you were in and how those places really informed this work. So yeah, that's I don't know. It's like, oh, that's really great to know. And then yes, right. The who is it for? And then the both audiences, both voices, which is something that you can definitely tell when reading the book. And in your book, in addition to like those two kind of perspectives and narratives, you also include art and tools, definitions, activities, and different like, suggested readings. So there are so many wonderful elements and resources in this book. So how do you envision readers interacting with this text?
So actually, maybe I'll go back to your last question just for a second, um, because I forgot to mention that the book it was inspired by it was supposed to be a cookbook, right? When I was writing it, and so as you ask now, how am I expecting people to use the book? I want people to think of it a little bit like a cookbook as well, where a cookbook will give you a recipe for something, and then you actually, when you're a little bit more comfortable with the recipe, you actually start to improvise, and you might throw away the recipe later on. And that was part of the idea early on in the book. What if making social change or changing the world was as easy as following a recipe? And as I was coming up with the book, I thought about, okay, do we want to talk about the method, like in the recipe, or do we want to talk about the ingredients? And as I wrote the book, that analogy changed a little bit, right? And actually, in the afterword of the book, I actually say it was supposed to be a recipe book, but we don't want you to think it's just as easy as following a recipe. But how do I want readers to interact with the text? I want them to think like a recipe book, that they can try things out and they can get it wrong and they can try something again, right? So like, if you were going to make bread, you do the recipe once. If the recipe is terrible, you'll adjust the ingredients maybe and you'll try it again. And I want people to understand that making social change, which is social change, is actually about getting the world to think differently about an issue. And then because of that, all of the social structures that support the old way of thinking eventually have to change and shift, and that's how we actually change the world. But making social change is iterative. I don't want to say it's easy, but we can try, and just kind of continue trying things out. And so that's why there are the tools. I want people to try out the tools. I want them to adapt them, make their own tools, reach out to me and show me the tools that they decided to use and make. And I want people not to think that the recipe is one that you have to follow faithfully, right? That you actually try things out. And then, so I have all of the art, and I do want it to be an immersive experience. I wanted people to feel comfortable dealing with this heavy theory, but I wanted to present it in a fairly light and accessible way. And so yeah, the idea is that the book is to prompt people to move into action, right? And I've had people reach out to me afterwards. They'll call me, like my own mother reached out to me and said, "Hey, there's this school across the street from us. I think I want to do this project with it." I want people to understand that, oh, part of your agency is also about you starting things and then you finding people to continue doing the things with you.
Oh, that's great. And I love that your mama is like, I'm going to use your book to make change. That's wonderful.
Yes, yes.
I love it. Inspiring the mamas.
Yeah, because mamas do stuff, right?
That's right. And get things done.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. That's a wonderful. And yes, thank you for sharing that. And I like how you framed it, like your book is a prompt to take action. And it really does give you tools. And it is I both had the chance to read part of it and listen. So hybrid style. And I enjoyed it both ways. It really is like a great guide. And I'm excited myself to try a few of
Hey,
the
good.
strategies and put a different frame and lens on as I do like my work. So I thank you with that. So guys, be sure to purchase and put to use Dr. Lesley-Ann Noel's book, Design Social Change, Take Action, Work Toward Equity, and Challenge the Status Quo. Be sure to amplify her works. I also wanted to shout out and celebrate a few of her other works. So she has designed multiple card decks to really prompt and inspire conversation. She has the designer's critical alphabet, the designer's good vibes alphabet, and empathy games for children. And then she's also the co-editor of the Black Experience in Design, Identity, Expression, and Reflection. So check out the book, check out her other works. These are wonderful ways to get to know who she is and what she's doing. So thank you for producing so much.
Thank you.
Well, we in the community are always ready to add examples and strategies and tools to our repertoire. So that's what makes this book great for us. It helps us to make the world a more just place. It also helps us connect to and visualize the important work that you're doing and to learn from you about the experiences of the people and places that you are serving in your work. Lesley-Ann, will you share an example from your book to help us visualize what it means to design for social change?
Yeah, so the book, I'm not going to share a specific example. I'm going to share like big
Okay,
strategy.
okay, okay,
I consider the book a book of strategies,
okay.
right? And the strategies are organized into three big sections. So the first section is about building a critical awareness of the world. And I think that that is, in fact, the first thing that you need to do to make social change, where you have to start to see the world for all that it is, not just maybe what people told us, not what our parents told us the world is, not, and really actually start asking questions of the world, not just taking everything for as a given, right? So that's like the first big strategy. Ask questions of the world, and that will help you start to see where change might be needed. If you ask, well, why is this bus stop only for people who walk, or people who don't, why can't somebody who uses a wheelchair use this bus stop, right? Or, I mean, that's just one example. Or why, you can start asking a lot of questions. Why is this class not available to people who can't be there in person, right? Or, and these questions can be uncomfortable for some people, but some things are never questioned. And so, if we want to talk about social change, that's actually the first step: learning to ask questions. And then those questions take us somewhere else, right? We then start to say, so what could the thing be instead? What if? So, another big strategy around social change is, and where we have started to identify the need to change, let's dream a little, imagine the what ifs. And then we could think about, okay, how do we get to the what if that we're dreaming of? And then that's, I mean, it is an oversimplification, and I acknowledge that, but I do want people to understand that change starts with us doing something, right? We ask these questions and then we move into action. And I want people to do that, get into action, right? And I'm not necessarily questioning what you want to change. I mean, I might plant a few seeds in people's heads about some of the things that need to be changed, but I want people to ask and see through their own lenses. So part of the critical awareness, building that critical awareness of the world, is also even understanding you and your own questions and your own lenses. And if we all start to look at the world through our different lenses, we'll start to identify some things that need to be changed. And we'll keep moving cumulatively and progressively towards these better and more just futures that we're both talking about in our work.
Yes. Yeah, I love questions. I mean, it's just, as a researcher, I like to interview people, I like to
Yeah.
ask questions. And when I do work with young people, it's all about like parents and young people is how do you create opportunities for your kids to ask questions. It's just so important. So I really appreciated and appreciate like you saying change or social change starts with doing something, and that is like looking at the world and asking questions of it and asking how it can be different. And I love it. And I think in your book where you talk about like different frames of oppression, different types of oppression, different frames of justice and ways to view and see the world, it does add tools, it adds vocabulary, different lenses to consider as we're going through that. Because what lens you might have had like when you were a young child, as you grow and you learn about other ways to view the world or other ways people are viewing the world, like, we can find those things to make a change. So that's really, I love it. Ask questions and then do something.
Yes. And I can get to something a little bit more specific because you just mentioned something that I'd like to build on. In that understanding the world, there is a recipe about understanding oppression, right? I don't remember what page it's on, but but in the class that I teach, a little light bulb goes off for students as we start to talk about oppression, because oppression literally means pressing people down, so it's opprimere. And when the students that I work with are able to see where people are being pressed down, they find it's actually easier to figure out where change is needed, right? So, it helps with the way they ask the questions when they can see, oh, this group of people are being excluded from this resource, and that's why we have to change it, right? Because they are excluded from getting that resource, they are in fact being pressed down or oppressed, and then some change kind of has to happen. So, I mean, that could be the way that you're finding where change is needed. And there are other frameworks as well. The Sustainable Development Goals might help people. If you think about, okay, what are the 17 goals and how do we get to them? That could help you ask the right questions about change that needs to be made. And again, if you even think about yourself and your identities or the people that you love, and you think about where are they being excluded, that also helps you see where some change might be needed.
Yeah, thank you. We have a comment from Kat. She says, insightful and wonderful conversation. Thank you both so much for taking the time to share your work. Looking forward to diving into your work, Lesley-Ann.
Thank you, Kat. I'm looking forward to getting your feedback.
Yes. So you, like you talked about, you have frameworks and language and examples within your book. But one of the things that I also enjoyed was that in Design for Social Change, you talk about centering and considering emotions within this work. And so will you share an example of how attending to emotion can change the design process or outcomes for communities that have been historically marginalized?
Yes. So one reason I ask people to think about the emotions is that, very often we're outside of a community, and we might look on or look out at people and say, oh my God, why are they so angry? Why are this? Why are they, in Trinidad, where I'm from, it might be that people are burning tires on the road and say, why are they burning tires on the road and protesting? And really, in creating social change, it is important for us to understand people have the right to be angry, right? And it's up to us to try to understand what is fueling their anger and kind of what needs to happen to, I don't want to say as a result, but that anger is an indicator for us, right? And so it's not really for us as outsiders or insiders to say, okay, those people need to stop doing XYZ, those people need to be less angry. It's really that we should be digging a little bit deeper to understand what's the cause of the anger and what is the thing that may need to change to appease that anger, right? So there's that lens of, well, anger is an emotion that's very suppressed. It's not considered a polite emotion. Of people are always kind of trying to manage other people's anger, right, and ignoring the real issues around it. But I encourage people to, in the book, I encourage people to process that anger, think about it. If it's their own anger, see how you can use it as a fuel to take action. And I've done that, right? Like, okay, so you mentioned the critical alphabet. I have it actually next to me. And this was one of my angry projects where I was doing some work, and sometimes you're on a team and maybe your point of view is just, it's difficult for you to get your point of view across in a team. And I was kind of angry all the time. And this professor who I was working with said, hey, use that anger, right? Or use the fact that you can't get your point of view across. Try to figure out, well, what was the point of view that you really wanted to add to the work that you were doing, and write about it. Now, he expected me to write a nice, good academic paper, but I couldn't do that, and that's what that's what happened with the card deck, where it was that I was really trying to figure out, okay, what were some of the concepts that I wanted to bring to the conversation, but for whatever reason I couldn't, right? And some of it might have been cultural. I wouldn't even say it's because of my colleagues or who they were. It was that we were kind of not always able to meet. We couldn't get our ideas across. And I then was frustrated because I couldn't get my ideas heard in the group, right? And so, even that emotional intelligence is related to being able to listen to people more, being able to see people, moving from the Caribbean to the US, it's a completely different. People might think it's similar, but it's actually like a very different society and a very different ways of listening to and seeing people. And so I think that emotional intelligence also requires us to stop and listen much more deeply, um, and actually see and connect with people, and then that helps us also get to the social change that we may need. And then the last part of the emotional intelligence is about community, right? And we make change with other people. So we have to figure out how we are building communities around the change that we want to make. How are we going to make sure that we're not isolated? How are we going to make sure that our lives are well balanced, so that we can continue to make more of the change that we want to experience in the world?
Oh, thank you so much. No, it's really great. But I notice, like, I appreciate how you're talking about anger, but still smiling.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah, I'm angry.
I was angry. Which is probably how you had to be in the group, But that's great, and I love that. Like the two things, like what's the source of that anger, right? Not
Yeah.
judging the emotion, but trying to figure out what is has happened or is happening that's causing that. Because I think then we can really start to get at naming what the problem is and designing for that. But then also that you use those emotions to create something that's helpful to others who might feel the same way or want to not make people feel that way.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. Just remember then it's fuel, and we can continue moving through that anger.
Yes, I love it. Well, on our episodes, we always have guests like you. You drop knowledge, you drop inspiration that really help us stay and like stay in our work and try to make the world a more just place. And you've done just that, Lesley-Ann. You've shared your twists and turns and random happenings that have really positioned you as a global design educator, a practitioner, a futurist, and one who helps others design more equitable futures. And so before you go, we'd love for you to drop one last bit of inspiration. What brings you joy as you continue to equip individuals and communities with the tools to design for equitable futures?
So I guess the thing that brings me, there are lots of things actually that bring me joy, right? So maybe that's good, and maybe that can be inspiring to other people that life is joyous, right? It is, we are on this joyful journey with other people and connecting with other people, that makes the journey better. The thing that really brings me joy might surprise people, but it is gardening. And I am like this real hippie, um, permaculture kind of gardener. I'm into native plants, and I get a lot of joy from how I've transformed my backyard. There is no grass. I have cardinals every morning coming in. There are all these native flowers, and I actually grow my own food during summer as well. And so, I think for me, the joy comes in thinking about, okay, if I want these equitable futures, part of these equitable futures are about me actually experimenting with how do I bring nature back into our lives? How do I bring wildlife back into our lives? How do we bring the food back from our garden into the kitchen? And I actually started doing this work because of some social design, as a social design project that I was working on, where we wanted to talk with community members about growing their own food. And I said, well, okay, I can't do this unless I'm really doing it myself. So, I think the joy is actually in being able to live in the prototype. And yeah, that's like, sounds like living in the matrix, but live in the prototype, and then be able to really talk with other people about, oh, this is how we transform the world right around us.
Well, thank you. I love that your joy brings you back to the land and food and people, which is like what it's about.
Exactly, that is what it's about, right? It's about people and relationships,
Mhm.
and this world that we live in distracts us and makes us forget that it, and tells us it's about money. Of course, it's a little bit about money, but it takes the focus away from what really matters, and we have to consciously bring it back to the things that matter every day.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Lesley-Ann Noel, for accepting my invitation to speak about what matters most to you. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to listen and learn and laugh with you, especially about the work that you're doing and the work that you want to continue to do that make the world a more just place. So thank you very much. I just have a few announcements. Just a reminder that we're here on the second and fourth Fridays at 11:30 a.m. Eastern. I will return in 2 weeks for a Remix EQ Live Season 5 finale. So on May 10th, I'll host another community reflections show where I'll hold space for us to reflect together about our perspectives and practices that can lead to more equitable outcomes in the places where we live, work, and play. So tune in on LinkedIn and YouTube. Also, like and share our upcoming and past shows, and watch your feed, check your inbox, and visit the Remix EQ Live webpage for episode announcements, recordings, and more information about our inspiring guests. I just wanted to catch, and Kat had another comment. Oh, wow. The joy is being able to live in the prototype. I'll be reflecting on that this weekend. Let's see, sending people into the weekend with reflections.
Yeah, and reflection is important, right? If you're not reflecting, you're not learning. So
Yeah.
yeah, Kat, you are inspiring me as well.
I love it. I love it. In the meantime, I invite you to view my recent TEDx talk, Building Community to Make the World a More Just Place. It was inspired by Remix EQ Live, and it was an opportunity to pause and reflect on the learning and inspiration I received from interviewing guests like Dr. Lesley-Ann Noel, our viewers, our social justice warriors. So please watch, react, leave comments, engage in dialogue with each other, and of course, share it. Also discover new ways to support the Remix EQ Live community, such as donation or love offerings, which make it possible to plan, promote, and produce these wonderful episodes that I hope you are listening and learning from. You can also purchase merch, such as our Amplify notebooks or our Empower notebooks as you journal and jot down those reflections, as well as any of our message teas. And then while you're on the show's webpage or you are engaging in a bit of justice-inspired retail therapy, please poke around the website and learn more about my business, Blue Knowledge, which advances equity in schools and communities through collaborative research, inclusive evaluation, and equity-driven professional and community learning. You can follow us on LinkedIn, the Blue Knowledge YouTube channel. And you can subscribe to our newsletter. And of course, I invite you to connect with me here in these digital streets. So thank you, Remix EQ community, for your engagement and your encouragement. And of course, your rally, which is how we recognize, appreciate, learn, love, and take care of you as you work to make the world a more just place. I'm your host, Dr. Erica Tate, and this is Remix EQ Live. See you next time.